Well, it wouldn't be a Sam Tate podcast without a technical issue. My computer blue screened halfway through your sentence there, Warren, but we're back live. This will probably be uploaded on YouTube in two parts because of that, but there's no reason why we can't continue talking about Mercedes and Kyrie here. Where did you know where we left off, Warren?
Well, I was just kind of turning the tables over to the look that Mercedes boasted. I know we spent a few minutes during while we were watching the match together kind of commenting how she came out looking semi confused as to the character she was portraying, especially with that green cape she was rocking and how that just really didn't work. I think the rest of it looked a little bit like Frost from Mortal Kombat now that I'm looking at it again. But
It
I
was
remember you talking
definitely
some.
weird. It's like she got the corset that says money on it commissioned and had an
Right.
idea for a look, and then at the last minute said, "Actually, I want to pay tribute to Hana Kimura."
Oh, well, that's a name drop I wasn't planning on producing myself. And I'll need you to break it down, and probably the rest of any listeners we might be enjoying, they probably need to understand Hana Kimura. Is that what you said?
Yeah, Hana Kimura was a Japanese women's wrestler who committed suicide not too long ago.
Oh, I think I do remember you
Yeah,
actually bringing that up.
and
And now I feel like a total tool.
I believe that I believe Kyrie had like a green braid in her hair to pay tribute to. I think she had a little bit too, but yeah, there's definitely some inspiration from both of those women to Hana Kimura. That
Oh, well, that's good. That helps justify it, and the fact that they shared that nod was pretty cool. Speaking of nods, I mean, Mercedes went out of her way to make sure she gave some nods to a couple of the most important wrestlers in her lore during the match. I don't know if you remember Mercedes first busting out a Bailey to belly.
yeah, I mean that's basically just any belly to belly suplex now, but yeah, that's got to be an obvious reference to her longtime friend and you know fellow wrestler in the stands that night.
Yeah, absolutely. Wanting to produce that in front of her friend who had been so important to her legacy over in the States, Bailey. That was cool watching her choose to make that move part of her repertoire. And just like in when Bailey does it these days, it didn't amount to a pinfall.
Yeah, I
And then
mean it's a cool little tribute, but if that would have been the finish, that would have been a little upsetting.
sure. Yeah. And well, she did the three amigos too. And showed everybody how, as much as she loves Eddie Guerrero, she doesn't quite know how to shimmy on his level, does she?
It's weird to shimmy with someone else on your arm, I guess. I don't know. Um I
That's
don't
true.
how often did Eddie shimmy while doing the three amigos? Like you gotta
That's
remember.
he may have hit the shimmy. You're right. He may have hit the shimmy like before he put their arm over his neck. Yes, to complete
Yeah.
the suplex position. But she chose to do it after that, just to kind of drive home to the Japanese audience. Hey, you know who I'm emulating, right? That was
She
kind
also
of funny.
did sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. She also did.
She also did a frog splash at one point, I'm pretty sure. And you're supposed to you do the shoulder roll at the top of the ropes. That's when both arms are free.
Ah, of course.
That's the that's
Yes.
the correct time to pay tribute to Eddie.
It's the little things, but
Hmm.
I'm glad that Mercedes is back in a wrestling ring one way or another. It's great that she's champion. Um I think that this was the groundbreaking, 20-minute spot fest to an extent and story that needed to kick off whatever this however new level of prestige women's wrestling is going to hit in Japan. I think it really did a great job setting a foundation, and I just got to wonder now who else is going to be brought into the fold to really help branch this group out. Do you see performers in AEW like Hikaru Shida or Riho returning to NJPW to flush out this division? There's a couple of great candidates there, but I'm curious if we've thought about who else is going to wrestle for this championship. I mean, it can't just be a two-woman horse race.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for the beginning. I mean, we saw this with AEW where you'll probably have to have a debuting person coming for that title and then another debuting person coming for the title, just to give your champion a mix of opponents. But it would be cool to see Kyrie stay in that picture at least for a minute just because they're not going to have too many other women's wrestlers, I don't think. Anytime soon. I can't really think of. See, the thing is, a lot of the big name women's wrestlers are usually treated fairly well. I would say. Um, it's just a different element because, like, when it comes to the men's roster, if you listen to the internet wrestling community, everybody's a main eventer. Everybody should be world champion, etc., etc. But when it comes to women's wrestlers, I feel like that there's kind of a clear cut between who people really like and who people think are just kind of there.
Well, sure. I mean, I feel like the line's getting thinner and thinner in certain promotions because so many of these women's wrestlers can actually go the 15 to 20 minutes that you'd expect them to have a real top notch level match. But it's all about how they're booked leading into those opportunities. If they're only getting 5-minute segments every week, it's hard to remember or believe to remember that they can do what we're discussing, that they can be main event level, that they can put on those really layered stories within the ropes. I
You know
think
what
there's
would?
a
Sorry, go
I was just
ahead.
gonna say, I think there's a lot of women. There's a lot of women who can hold their own in the ring and have come such a long way, and I have a lot of respect for. So I'm not worried that they're not going to show up. I just imagine they're probably going to be guest spots more often than not for a while Mercedes Monet really anchors this division for an extended period and probably defending against Kyrie every once in a while, but those two are probably going to be the ones elevating the talent there and beating outside stars for at least a good while, unless there's more of a division over in Japan than we realize already.
A good candidate. I don't think it's necessarily what they'd want to do or really the right time in their career, but the person who could maybe benefit a lot would be Jade Cargill from AEW.
Mm-hmm.
You would
Imagine.
simultaneously get to work with someone who has all the benefits. I'm not saying it's perfect, but the benefits of someone who was at the top of the division in WWE, who was part of their big, maybe not the start of the women's wrestling revolution, but definitely its true renaissance, and at the same time in Japan get to work with someone who has experienced WWE but ultimately chose NJPW and was brought up with the Japanese style, and I think there's probably some Facebook quote or some interview shtick because somewhere in the back of my head, there's something about Daniel Bryan talking about Jade Cargill would benefit from going to Japan. So that's probably the seed that was planted in my head. But the biggest thing is Jade is supposedly really green. She's not having really diverse matches. It's very similar to a modern day Goldberg. She's not booked exactly the same, but uh, compared to Asuka's undefeated run, people weren't complaining that Asuka is new and an amateur or not having diverse opponents and matches and stuff, right? So we've seen the super hot streak women's wrestler, and she happens to be from Japan. So why not send someone on an undefeated streak to Japan?
I think it's a solid idea, especially because I think Mercedes could really stretch her out and really explore what her catalog of moves is and give her some really good spots for her to benefit from. The only downside is, as I don't think either woman is really in a position to be ready to lose. Jade,
Yeah,
you don't want Jade's record to topple internationally, and you You don't want to see her beat Mercedes, at least not for a few months, right? Probably a good 6-month reign minimum is about to
Well,
happen for Mercedes.
this is how I
But
felt about Kyrie and Mercedes too, though. You know, I'm like excited that Kyrie got to wrestle at Wrestle Kingdom, and you know, I've seen her in WWE, so I'm already a fan. You know, I've already seen more of her matches, so I'm invested there. I love the insane elbow. I dig the, you know, I dig the presentation, the character, all that stuff, and like now we're introducing someone who I enjoyed watching in WWE as well, and I don't think either of them can afford to lose.
right. No, I'm with you. It could be a good program to do several months over actually, you know. What if they really had one of those classic 3-month programs where the rivalry truly escalates, but maybe they take turns cheating their way out of the situation. Like maybe Mercedes cheats her way out of a first match with the Jade Cargill in Japan, and then in the second match, Jade is overwhelmed by how Mercedes has prepared this time, and
I
she cheats, not wanting to see her
bro,
streak get lost.
I got the dream book for you. I got it's easy. It's so easy to me. It's so
I'm listening.
simple. All right. You bring Jade over. She wrestles Mercedes Monet, and Mercedes is like, you know, I'll even put I might put the title on the line. Like, I think it's fine if they don't even tease the title match, because as soon as they put the title on the line, people start to get certain speculation. So I would say, you know, it's a show match, right? It's exhibition. It doesn't have to be for the title, even though people will complain about that part. But what ends up happening is you find one of the rules that NJPW has different from AEW, and you work that into the finish. So, like, for example, maybe there's a, like, they do the 20 count in Japan, but that doesn't seem like something that could, like, fool somebody, right? Like, Jade would be, you know, used to a 10 count. But you got to find some rule, some way you can get disqualified in Japan that you wouldn't normally get disqualified in AEW, and use that for the first finish, because that protects Jade. You know,
Yeah.
that protects her from getting pinned, but she still loses, and it's not her turf. So then
Uh-huh.
she has her training arc, she has her rematch, she has, you know, whatever it takes, where she's like, okay, now I'm ready, now I'm prepared. I'm not green, I'm not new, you know what I mean? Like, I've done my research, I've done my homework, and she can win that match, you know, clean, whatever, because it's still an exhibition. And now she
Right.
has every right to claim that she's better than your champion. So obviously we have to put the gold on them.
Yes. Yes. I like the idea of her accidentally messing up her own opportunity. And then I think even then the payoff at the end should be
It's
Jade
just, it's
losing.
the simplest way that makes the most logical sense to protect a newcomer. They don't know the rules yet. Something they're used to, a different rule set. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That just, maybe there's too many people who go and wrestle in Japan for that to be like a realistic outcome. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like it's a new thing that someone has come to Japan from America to wrestle, but that's how I would do it.
I think it's awfully clever, especially if the commentators put it over better than they put over Mercedes' new move at the match that we saw.
Oh, well, her
Um,
new move sucks. So you're talking about the moneymaker?
yeah,
That
well,
move
I mean,
sucks. It's not a
sure.
good
I
finish.
I just wanted it to be something that they announced more along the lines of, "Oh, we've never seen that before. Looks like a new
Oh,
trick up her sleeve," kind
it,
of
it
thing, instead of
so this is a whole episode we're gonna have to do in the future. She had to do it at Wrestle Kingdom, because if she didn't do it at Wrestle Kingdom, you wouldn't know it's her finishing move, so you wouldn't know it's the end of the match. So as a storytelling device, they couldn't debut it there, even though it would have been really cool. And you could have debuted it there if it was a really cool move and it looked really punishing, because then people wouldn't be upset. They would go, "Wow, that was fucking sick." And then when it ends the match, it wouldn't be that surprising because it was a really sick move. But because it's not a really sick move, you can't spring it on people by surprise, because they'll go, "Oh, that ended the match? What the fuck?" But then you also spoil that Wrestle Kingdom that's not a cool move, and she botched it.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. She did. She botched the shit out of it. And and like you were saying earlier, it looked similarly when it was performed correctly. But I shouldn't have opened that can of tangent. What I was trying to really summarize is I would love for the commentators to be like, "Oh, look at Jade. She doesn't realize that the count is 20." Or similarly, important rule in Japan,
Oh, I just figured out how you could work that in. She's waiting for Sasha. She's waiting for Mercedes to get counted out, and the ref hits 10, and she starts to celebrate and turns her back, and then Mercedes gets in from behind and jumps her from behind. And Jade's like,
Well,
oh, she thinks she won. She thinks it's over, but it's not.
it's totally doable, except that it makes Jade look like a total twit. But at the end of the day, you might want that to really, maintain credibility, as you were suggesting. So
Yeah,
I'll tell you,
again, the countout rule probably not the best, but there's got to be something, right?
we'd have to dig into it and find what other rules might exist out
Oh
there
my
that.
god, dude, the foreign heel heat of Jade, because they usually like post match interviews, they do like the press scrum type of thing there, which everyone in America is starting to copy. Um,
Right.
you could, dude, imagine the foreign heel heat of Jade Cargill just talking shit about referees. Like she's just like, he disqualified me for that. What kind of punk ass bullshit federation is this? You know, like what kind of pussy ass
Mhm.
company fucking DQs you for throwing someone over the top rope? You know, some shit like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It would really help give her a certain amount of like prestige and authority, and not authority, but I mean, like, here in America, we are not yet looking at Jade as like a top-notch presence, if that makes sense.
Well,
But
presence is
somebody,
the one thing she top notch has. She is a
right.
not a top notch figure, I think is what you're trying to say. But presence she fucking has.
What I'm trying to say is we don't look at her as a top shelf star, do we?
Right. She's not a
But if she,
household name.
But if she goes over to Japan and mows over their traditions and mows over their rules and mows over, like, well, in this case, their champion, and then talks mad smack about how it was complete and total fluke she's not already considered the top wrestler in this, second rate country, quote unquote, that would help an entirely different demographic take to her in a way that America has yet to do so, truthfully.
Yeah,
And I
knowing
think that'd be
Japan
pretty cool.
though, it's not something that they do this early on. They'd have to establish more homemade Japanese stars. It's just pretty important to them, not just like culturally, but also because if you're like the smaller fish in in the pond, you don't want it to always be like this was the problem with like TNA and Impact, right? Like it's always someone else's company's stars making your stuff look good. So it's very
Mhm.
important to them that there are Japanese champions and Japanese stars, basically.
Right. Yeah, an Okada for the women's division, so to speak.
Right.
But for now, Mercedes needs to be that title holder, and probably Kyrie will remain in the picture. And, just for fun, I thought
Oh,
one
do it
super.
with Kyrie. Have Kyrie win the belt. Sorry. Have Kyrie win the belt and then just, it doesn't have to be Mercedes.
No, it doesn't, but I think her being there has helped elevate the interest to a level that is necessary for it to maintain in order for women's wrestling in Japan to truly soar as far and as high as I think they're hoping to launch it to with these decisions, or else why not just have Kyrie keep the belt?
I mean, that's what I would have done, but I'm a big fan of, like, so, especially with the way the world is today when it comes to wrestling, like, people really won't care who has the belt as long as the match is really good and as long as the other wrestler still gets their time to shine, like their opportunities and stuff like that. There's very few times where people are like, "Oh, so and so has to win this," and whenever that happens, especially in WWE, they never have that wrestler win because like Sami Zayn really kind of needed to win that world championship, and now who gives a fuck about him?
We're trying really hard to avoid a specific promotion in this conversation, so forgive me for wondering. Instead, wouldn't it be fun if Chris Statlander was one of the performers that got pulled into Japan to face Mercedes and help elevate their own star as well as the overall star of the women's division?
You're gonna regret posing that as a question because the answer is no.
Oh,
I'm not a Chris Statlander fan.
I like her. I think she's got a lot more ceiling than she's been able to explore in AEW. And I know she's been battling pretty much back to back injuries, which is just regrettable, but the potential sure is there. You want to talk about presence too. I mean, she's somebody I want to see wrestle Jade Cargill anyway. So I don't know. Just another person I'd love to see kind of go out there and mess around with Mercedes and do something cool out there. Any
Yeah.
or maybe Jordan Grace has been catching a lot of
Ooh.
ongoing and steadily increasing attention over an Impact. I mean,
We
one of the
love
most
Jordan Grace here at Scheduled for One Fall.
we do. Why not? A very unique talent and strong. Oh my god, so powerful and difficult to argue against as like the toughest woman to beat in a wrestling ring regardless of the promotion or the locale, huh?
She has come a long way from being one of Kevin Nash's hoes.
Damn. Damn. Many people hopefully have come a long way from
That's,
being Kevin Nash's hoe
it's
though.
the deep dive. There's actually, I think, two out of three of them. That Kevin, I don't think they were like hoes specifically, but if you grew up watching The Godfather on WWF, anytime there's unnamed female valets and there's a group of them, it used to be culturally appropriate to just call them the hoes because that was like their official on-screen name. So I realize now it's 2023, but like that was kind of her role on Impact at the time. I'm not calling, anyways. It's a deep dive. You
Wow.
should go back and check it out. Kevin Nash used to have female talent that would like follow him around and shit.
Oh man, anything to be unlike the real life he led. I'm just kidding. I'm sure he got so much pootie tane.
But like she
Unbelievable.
went from having literally the worst spot on a wrestling show you could have, one that's like not even for wrestlers, to being pretty much on the cusp of, if it wasn't for like the Rhea Ripley recent blow up, I think Jordan Grace might be the most talked about female wrestler. Like there's just actually so much happening with women's wrestling. It's almost a shame that she's really kind of hitting her peak in like having her longest. I'm pretty sure it's her longest stint as champion right now. Um, like right
Well, it
when
was.
IWGP is getting what?
It was. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think she's champ right now. I think Mickey James took it off her in a
Oh,
career versus championship match.
rest in peace. That's yeah. I haven't kept up super much. Right. Like you basically you get to devote like each month to catching up with the next wrestling promotion. So like we caught up with WWE in January, and now we're trying to get caught up with AEW and uh
New Japan.
New Japan through February and now into March, and then we'll probably spend the rest of March getting caught up with AEW and Impact or something. And then by the time the end of March rolls around, it'll be like WrestleMania season, and we'll be back on WWE,
Right.
right?
Right, exactly. So we might as well use this lull while WWE starts creating the stories that we've predicted and we've talked about a lot, right? And we won't talk about on this week because we're challenging ourselves, guys. Um, we're gonna let them formulate what we've expected, and in the meantime, just see how everybody else is doing because they're up to some really important stuff. I mean, New Japan's going to try to turn this into a certain type of women's revolution of their own there in the Far East, and I think if this first match was any indicator, there's plenty of reason to watch. So let's all be good fans, right? And let's all put on our progressive women's wrestling hats and grab the remote control and or click on to NJPW's portal and try to follow along with this because there is plenty to believe or plenty that leads us to believe that we're just getting started, and that's what's truly exciting about it. And
Yeah.
since you've exposed the fact that you're so behind the times in Impact, I want to let you know, since we have a few minutes before we really want to start turning our attention to what happened at AEW Revolution 2023.
Now, I really thought Mickey was going to retire at that match too, actually. So that's part of it.
Mickey is still, committed to having the career that she has trailblazed for the last 20 years. And bless her, she's great. She's still in great shape. She looks better than she did back when she debuted as Trish's Weird Stalker.
Yikes,
And
yeah.
there's plenty of fans along the independent scene and the impact scene. I don't even know if that counts as an independent. I don't think it does. It's tough for me to really understand. But um like she's got so many different people's respect still that she still has a career if she, at this point. And she might be calling it a day soon, but one more title run and really in this Twilight stage seems to be well deserved. So she won the title a couple weeks back, and I saw a screenshot as I'm pulling it up on my phone if I can that blew my mind as to what happened in one of the more recent impacts. But a certain Jeff Hardy showed up on Impact recently. I don't know if you knew that at all.
I heard some murmuring about it, I think, before it happened, but I haven't seen anything regarding the details of him showing up, you know? I have mixed feelings about it because he's I don't want to say he's just like old as shit now, right? But like, there's clearly a time where a guy should have retired, and with the kind of career Matt and Jeff have had, Matt's pivoted way more into that managerial role for a very good reason. And Jeff, I don't see doing that. Like in my head, there's a perfect version and like a way to do everything. So like in my head, don't get me wrong, I would try to do it right, but I don't see it working out that way, and I'm scared for him to be wrestling.
Well, I do wonder why he is at this point, because I do feel like every time we do watch him, he's just doing the spots that we synonymize with Jeff Hardy, but he doesn't have that body that should be absorbing these blows anymore and these crazy choices he makes. And
Like it's pretty
part of
clear
me,
he wears padded ring gear now, right?
well, if he isn't, then,
Like ever since he
just
switched like that purple and black like body vest outfit or whatever that he was running around with, like if so, this is something that I know you and I have talked about, and I always try to put it out there that like a lot of the wrestling I like and grew up on is not possible anymore. It's just too dangerous, right? It's just not feasible to do it. Like Randy Orton doing the RKO for 20 years is just not a good idea. Something as innocuous as a cutter, as a simple finisher like that is not something you can do for 20 years because it involves jumping in the air and landing on your fucking back.
oh yeah. I mean,
50 years of doing a leg drop. Like Hulk Hogan's biggest regret is choosing the leg drop as a finishing move and not like a slap or something. So there's probably going to be a world where wrestling looks more like kickboxing in the future, just because guys don't have to take slams and take bumps to do their own moves.
oh yeah, strikes are becoming more and more a popular choice for a finisher for all wrestling types at this point. And
Like how often
I
do
think,
guys even do suplexes? Like it's rude to do half the moves now because it's taken years off everyone's life, both the guy doing it and his opponent.
well, it makes you wonder. I personally feel like wrestling as a whole has too many dates on the calendar for these guys. I feel
Yes.
like the ones that matter are enough to get them paid enough to live their lives comfortably, and they shouldn't be having to work 5 out of 7 days of the week, sometimes at a minimum, in order to pay their bills and hone their craft. I mean, sure, they work 15 minutes a night, but I mean, like you're saying, uh, that kind of stuff wears on the body more than people realize. I mean, I've been driving around in my car recently realizing how much my car seat hurts my ass and flares up my sciatica nerve. Like, that's not a joke. I'm just realizing here I am at 34, having done plenty of driving and plenty of sitting in my life and career, especially recently. And man, it fucking hurts. So imagine these guys hitting, RKOs, leg drops, swanton bombs through tables, no less, sometimes on the outside of the ring for crying out loud. I don't know how Jeff Hardy gets through any individual day at this point. It's got to be with extreme pain. And I worry about him because I think part of him, like, that's his how he stays in touch with what it's like to be alive, is that pain. And I worry that he once his body will not let him do it anymore. I don't know. I hope he's got stuff to live for. Like, I'm a little worried about that. What can I say?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
But
he's had points where you're afraid for the people around him and the people he's working with. Now I'm just afraid for him. Like, I out of morbid curiosity, I watched Ric Flair's last match, and you know, I'm glad it's a Ric Flair accolade in a very weird way, and it cements his legacy as the type of person he was, more so than the type of wrestler he was. And I hope no one else ever attempts to do that ever again, and we leave that as a benchmark of and I felt this way kind of like about the end of an era match too, which ended up really not being that big of a staple or a what's the word, like a landmark in history, I don't think. But
mm-hmm.
I really hope nobody tries to outdo Flair on this one, because A, Flair kind of like deserves it, and B, the 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 business should evolve past that. It should evolve past the point of you know some level of strict tough guyedness, to the point where it's purely detrimental.
I think he'd be a very interesting case study to monitor and learn more about mental health and its relationship with the ring. And I can't gotta believe that we're only a few years away from a series of documentaries really looking into minds like his. And I would be really interested to hear firsthand stories if if he ever opens up on what this all has been like for him and what has been the highs, the lows. There's so much I'm sure we'd learn, but he's one of the more interesting case studies in wrestling. But as I'm scrolling through all of the different Google searches I've tried to do in order to prove what I've discussed with you, that I saw a picture of him and Bully Ray standing across the ring from each other with Impact, headlines all over it, I'm realizing that maybe it actually didn't happen. And this little 10-minute tangent to bridge the gap between NJPW and women's wrestling and the AEW Revolution pay per view we're also able to take in together on Sunday needs to come to a close promptly because it may have been a huge waste of time. So,
See, that's
um,
your problem, bro. You go to all them dirt sheet websites, you pay attention to all them rumors, you get the leaks and the spoilers. You gotta remain a wrestling purist like me.
the biggest problem I have, man, is just reading my Bleacher Report articles, because I don't get to watch it all moment by moment, and I don't know how much of my life I'd have to strip away in order to be able to. So I'll be reading my Bleacher Report articles, and there will be a flash and a face of this, that, or the other at the bottom of the article. And 9 times out of 10, I know that to be hogwash, but every once in a while it fools me. So let's just take a
Well,
moment of silence to allow everybody across our listening pool to call me a dumbass.
let's
Thank you.
put a cap on Mercedes and Kyrie, because
Please.
this is
And
about the
what
time where we're gonna have to start talking about Revolution if we want to talk about every match. And I know that you want to talk about every match because you get very upset at me when I skip matches, because some matches aren't worth watching or talking about. But if we're gonna have time for that, we're already in the second hour. So,
I'm so
give
proud
me
of
a
us.
match rating for Kyrie versus Mercedes for the IWGP Women's Championship.
When you and I talked about this at the end of the match and thinking about, everything to consider about this, the history that's being built, the the quality of the match itself, the performers chosen, the production around it, the way that they move from beat to beat, the pace, the audience interaction when they did choose to do it. I think I gave you this number then and I'll give it to you now, and it's held pretty true in my heart. I think all that factored in, I'm calling it a 8.75.
I don't think you said 8.75,
No,
bro.
I said 9. I said
Yeah, I think
9
you said
then.
9, bro. And
I
I think
did.
I said 8, right?
You said it was a pretty solid 8, 8.5.
Yeah, it was between 8, 8.5. And a lot of that for me came from really specific spots. Like I said, it seemed a little spot festy, but considering where it was, considering the show it is, right? Because I'm not gonna say it's like graded on a curve or anything, but if this was the build up to a Wrestle Kingdom feud that had been going on for months and stuff like that, maybe I judge it a bit more harsh. But because it's the Battle in the Valley one off cross promotion, really, kind of a show, um, I'm down to give it at least solid 8, 8.5 right. But like the few things that they did really well, and the few things that were maybe not like fully unique, but like stuff I don't see very often anymore, I thought was really good. The stuff that really drag it down for me would normally count against it really hard. Like Kyrie has weird ring psychology is all I'm gonna say, because we're we're not gonna have time to
Oh
really talk
yeah.
all about it. But there's definitely some times where it's not just like they could have capitalized. It's like you're just doing things in the wrong order. Does that make sense? Like,
Are you
so
talking about her march in a giant circle before doing her body
no, that
splash
shit's
spot?
fine. That's normal wrestling stuff. I'm talking like we're gonna power bomb someone through the table and then pick up the money and then climb up onto the table and then throw the money and then climb back down and then like she like climbed up then
Ah,
down then up, like, and there's just a couple
yes.
times where she seemed like she was turned around.
Well,
um
as you mentioned at the moment, now that I recall, Bret Hart wouldn't have done that, because with you had stated instead she would have smashed the money or stuffed it down Mercedes's mouth, right? Like
yeah,
would have
like,
done something offensive with the spot to like further degrade her or make
right,
less of her gimmick, I should say.
like you would
So,
have put you would have had the table on the stage and put her through the table on the stage, so you're already standing up. Just little nitpicks mostly, which is why I don't want to get into it, because we're already into the second hour. So like, just little stuff. There's just little things that would have normally counted way more against the score if it was at a WrestleMania or like a huge major pay-per-view of the. That's all.
okay. Yeah, I get it. And it was weighted a little bit in the positive direction because of the lack there the lack of the history, I should say, in women's wrestling in Japan, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. So like there's different ways that we push that around, but I thought it was a great match for what it was. Thought
Yeah.
both
The
women
power
came out of
bomb
it
was
looking
fucking
better.
sweet though.
Oh yeah.
The lifting the boots for the elbow drops and the frog splashes, I thought that was a good touch. Watching Kyrie just actually, like, I've never seen that. I don't think I've ever seen someone just do an elbow drop onto someone's feet like that, or what. So that looked particularly crunchy.
Yeah, it was a good counter. You don't see that. You're absolutely right. And I
Normally
think
they
she
do the jumping nothing into the boot, where they're not even trying to do a wrestling move.
Precisely. I get what you mean. So at least some new stuff was tried, and I know a lot of it was new to the audience that they performed in front of. So congratulations to both ladies. Let it be a vaulting point for new lore and a totally different type of wrestling to be celebrated in Japan. And I'm going to be staying tuned for more. I definitely want to follow how this impacts the culture. So
Yeah. In the future, I'm taking a full point off for every moneymaker that happens, though, because that move is
wow,
terrible. So don't expect too many 8 pluses in the future.
wow, you're harsh.
A
You're
finish
so
is
harsh.
important. A bad finish can ruin a good match. That's how I feel. It might not ruin a great match, but a bad finish, like it's almost like, if you have like a scale of like good is plus 1 point, great is 2 points, and you have bad and terrible. It's almost like the bad scale is doubled. That's just how it goes. It's like a
Okay.
bad thing is minus 2 points, a terrible thing is minus four.
Man, well, it can impact a score, and it's true. It does impact an overall feel of a match, as we'll discuss, I'm sure, in our next segment, which is all about AEW Revolution 2023. I am down to attack this however you prefer. There are definitely matches on the card that I don't need to dissect a ton, but
Right.
hopefully we can at least share some gut reactions for each one. And I'm ready to get started.
Yeah, strangely enough, I think the opening match was the worst. And that's not saying a whole lot. It's not saying it was like terrible, but it was just like a very normal match. Like it's the kind of thing where we say this is a cable match. If Jericho and Ricky Starks had this match on TV, it probably would have done its job just fine.
The only reason why I'll beg to differ is that it's a loss for the veteran on this one. Chris Jericho doesn't like to. I mean, he loses for people a lot. He's one of the most selfless wrestlers I would say of his generation, as far as putting younger guys
I was gonna
over.
say he puts over everybody, dude. What do you mean?
It's a beautiful thing.
Who
I
has
love it.
Jericho not put over? That's the thing. Like everyone he's worked with, he pretty much puts over. He's never just gotten one over on someone ever.
And arguably, that's what makes him one of the greatest of all time, even more, is that he's so selfless with how he shares the spotlight that it's amazing he truly has had the sheer number of accolades and memorable times on top that he has had, because he's so willing and ready to help the rest of the business out. So that's not where I'm going with this. What I'm saying is that the losses still count, but they count more on pay-per-view. And so for Ricky Starks to get the win over Chris Jericho at this pay-per-view, it was just another super solid notch in his belt. He's now beaten Chris Jericho twice, I guess, in this storyline, and many are calling for that to be the end of the feud. And there was nothing here that made me think it does need to continue. I think Jericho just helped this young rising star get a good win on his resume fairly solidly. And there even was supposed to be some tomfoolery. There was even somebody running in, Sammy Guevara, right? And he got taken out by Action Andretti, who came out of nowhere to protect Starks. And I think that
Another
there's really
classic
not
AEW. Who are these guys and what is their relationship? Kind of a thing.
right. You see that a lot, right? The long list of like what is their whole thing is
Mhm.
definitely something we see a lot. But I felt like it was pretty paint by numbers. It's true. I don't remember anything really standing out as being new and unique. And at the end of the day, the only thing that separated, Ricky from a loss was his ability to put up an arm and block the Judas effect, right? And
Yeah.
that was it. He just did a good old fashioned like side block that you might learn in martial arts when you're going for your yellow belt. And that was
Or
all
by
it
watching
took.
TV, or by just saying, "Hey, I don't want to get hit in the face here. Maybe I should
Right.
put my arm up."
Right. So he blocked it, turned it around into an offensive opportunity for him. He hit his finish on Jericho, and that was it. So it was pretty paint by numbers. I think that both guys did what you'd expect them to do on a televised match to move themselves closer to a victory, and they just allowed Ricky to be one step ahead on this one. So, I mean, does it make me think Ricky's closer to being a top-notch star? Not me personally. I'm not ready to wrap my arms around him and call him the future yet. But he's already been there in the way that he's marketed at AEW, and this is gonna help him. So, yay! I give it a 6 out of 10.
Mm, it's very generous.
I figured you'd say that.
It's a 3 out of 10, man. It's a curtain jerk. It's got to go hard. And match just had like no real wrinkles. I mean, I guess the blocking the Judas effect is pretty cool. I don't think I've ever seen it done quite like that, and they did it right. So the things that they did really well. It was just, this is what I mean, where it's like you take something to like a big pay per view kind of a thing. I think for AEW, they haven't really established that they have like a WrestleMania thing, right? Like none of them are strictly bigger than the others yet. So maybe that'll come in time. Maybe this isn't supposed to be that big of a deal, but I felt like Revolution was supposed to be a pretty big deal this year. And I don't know, man. For a curtain jerk match, I was just like, all right, cool. This was a thing. I wish I knew to skip it because this was the one to skip. Um, there's one other match I think that's pretty skippable, but I always got to watch me some Jericho because he might do something.
Absolutely. I mean, he's one of the greatest. I mean, you and I have definitely been hinting that we consider Jericho to be one of the top two or three best of all time at this point. So it's almost like watching a young lion take on, Tanahashi over in Japan, or, uh,
Un-
some former world champion, right, who's helping the new guys out. I mean, it's part of the wrestling lore and the system, and fine. It was fine. So, moving on. We had one veteran give up a spot to a younger guy, and now we had the opportunity to see the same thing again. But would we, when it was Christian Cage battling Jungle Boy at long last? They're blowing off the feud and having what they called a final burial match for this one in what was presented very similarly and almost hilariously so to the buried alive and casket matches that a certain WWE would produce, except they kind of merged the aesthetics and crammed them into the corner of the stage there at Revolution. And boy, this one was also a thing, wasn't it?
yeah, they sure did go to all the places between the ring and the casket. Um, it's kind of interesting. I mean, they had the casket and the actual buried alive element, so like it's all the same shit, right? So that was
Yeah.
kind of neat. Instead of having the casket, I prefer the casket next to the ring.
Uh
That's
huh.
just me. But again, like this is buried alive, right? Like this is just the only difference between buried alive and casket is you have to drag them up to the ramp to bury them alive.
Right.
But this match had nothing special, but it had the intensity that it really needed. I think this one was also kind of a low point, but it was early enough in the night where it wasn't going to be a huge deal. I'm just glad this feud is finally fucking over.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Oh, I'm glad it happened because Christian's been off TV, not and hasn't done a whole lot of wrestling for AEW since he debuted about a year and a half ago or so. And, it was a long time to wait for the payoff, but I will say this for the match is that I feel like Christian's intent to help Jungle Boy in this match was more evident than Chris Jericho's attempt to help Ricky Starks in the previous one. Christian really wanted to help get this Jungle Boy star closer to the cornerstone of AEW he's been discussed as.
Yeah.
And I liked that it was a gimmick match, and I liked that there was some juice. Christian gave up some blood for this one, and we even started chatting like it was the hard way. It didn't look like your traditional cut. It looked like it was in the corner of his eye or something like that. And I thought that both guys got in enough offense to really, show us a decent amount from each of their catalogs and their repertoires. You got to see a shovel used, who doesn't like a good old shovel in pro wrestling scenarios, and some good back and forth. There was definitely a moment or two where I thought Jungle Boy was gonna lose it. He took an unprettier on the dirt mound at one point, and that's pretty darn close to the casket. So, as much as I don't feel like there was too much memorable about it, there was something memorable about the scenario and the matchup and the moment itself of Christian getting back into the ring, which he doesn't do often, and letting Jungle Boy give him a pretty solid defeat.
The year is 1998. I'm watching Chris Jericho and Christian job to Youngblood on pay-per-view to help them get over. The year is
Wow.
2010. I'm watching Chris Jericho and Christian job to Youngblood on pay-per-view to help them get over. The year is 2023. I'm watching Chris Jericho and Christian job to
Oh
Youngblood to help them get
no.
over.
Right, and I think you and I, being fans of both of these guys to the extent that we are,
Hold
we
on.
know.
Don't fucking no, do not imply that I'm a Christian fan. Ew.
You should be. Christian's given so much to this business, man. He's done so many things, and
He's
he's given
just
so little
discount
credit.
Edge, bro. He's Edge who cut his hair first.
Who gives a shit? Matt Hardy's discount Jeff, you know?
No,
Like,
those guys are
and
solidly different, and
Devon is discount Bubba, but they're
they're
still
not even the same. Oh my god.
they're incredibly important. They still gave shit tons to the business, and Christian deserves to be given a lot of respect. So
You're not even an
I
Impact fan. You haven't even watched Christian's best stuff. That's what's weird to me. Is I've watched the best of Christian and I'm still not like that big on him.
So Christian's best stuff on Impact was perpetrated at a time when Impact was harder to get a hold of for me than WWE was, and I just didn't want to go out of my way or couldn't go out of my way
But you
because
would have if Christian
otherwise,
was good enough.
I
If Christian
mean,
was really the world champion that they needed to get eyes on their product, you would have. That was the whole point. And he failed in that.
but that doesn't mean he as a competitor has any less of my
You just want
respect.
to pay respect to the fact that he's taken bumps for 40 years, and I get that, and that's cool. But I just don't imply I'm a fan of Christian.
Excuse me for putting your fandom in your mouth, but for me, I get you what you're saying. It's Groundhog Day. We're watching the same grizzled old vets give up, the same quality wins on the same quality pay-per-views to the, rotating younger talent of the decade, so to speak. And there's definitely truth to that. Both Ricky and Jungle Boy are the types of guys who don't look like they could beat their larger and more experienced counterparts in these matches, but they did. And hopefully that will lead to pushes for each of them, or these kinds of wins are meaningless. My prediction is that Jungle Boy gets a little bit more love out of his win over Christian than Ricky Starks will out of his win over Chris Jericho, if only because it was a gimmick match, and now Jungle Boy gets to be fired up as he proclaims he's putting Christian behind him for good. But the match itself was pretty blasé.
I do have more hope for Ricky Starks than I do Fandango. So that's good.
True. And I think, at the same time, however, that's a pretty low ceiling. So hopefully he can
Right.
raise that pretty darn soon in some way, shape, or form because Yeesh. I mean, Ricky, I like Ricky on the mic. I know he can be intense and believable on that. I just don't know if I like his in ring work just yet, and I'm not a huge fan of his really strange signature pose he's been hitting a lot recently, where he turns to the left and stares into his own hand and like puts his other hand out like he's striking a model pose or something or trying to keep the dog away.
It's
Like,
a Greek statue.
I'm still not in love with it, but
Right.
he himself is Greek, and I'm sure
Actually, wait, it
that's
might
where it
not be
needs to
Greek, but
help.
it's I'll look up which specific. It's a specific pose from sculpting, but
And it's
yeah,
like
he's essentially trying to hit an Adonis pose, and like I get that, and I'm actually here for it. I dig the pose. I just think it needs a belt. It looks good when he has a belt in his hand. It doesn't look good when he's not holding a title belt. That's my beef.
well, there you go.
When you're
And
looking
he
at your
finally
hand, you're just giving me like some Booker T vibes. When Booker T
right.
is saying 5 time while looking at the belt, it's great. When he's saying 5 time and he's talking to himself, he looks crazy.
And that's all we should leave that with. So, well done.
What was the
Um
next match on this card? Because I know this one was your favorite of the night.
I'm wondering if is it our street fight
For
or are we being
the next match on the card?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This one came earlier than I expected, and yeah, it did. It did do a lot for me. It did do a lot for me, but I do want to, before we move on to it fully, I just want to plant the seed of, two veterans giving up to younger guys pattern
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right
Everyone
there.
knows it's called Revolution, bro.
Just put that over there. But now
That was
let's move on to
obvious.
what
Everyone knows.
se- now let's move on to a slightly different type of pattern that was beginning to develop through this match. This was John Moxley doing what John Moxley does best, fighting in death matches, a Texas death match this time. Not sure what made it Texas, but that's fine. And it
The standing 10 count. Well, so
what
originally a Texas death match is supposed to be um they can't answer the count of 10 and then you pin them for 3 seconds, or no, I think it's you pin them for 3 seconds and they can't answer the count of 10. But it's literally a pinfall and a last man standing match
Oh wow,
together.
neato.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, that's
That's
cool.
traditionally what it is, but obviously that doesn't make sense these days, so
This one was pinfall, submission, or you can't answer the 10 count.
there used to be a
And
time in wrestling where you could get a pinfall without knocking someone unconscious, but nowadays you just knock people unconscious for 30 seconds anyways, so there's no reason to do the pinfall part.
mm, amen. Well, it does seem like a little messy and unnecessary, like choice of rules, but this one definitely brought it as far as the violence. Most definitely, John Moxley's known for this, but I felt like Hangman Page won, I'd say 30% more credits for me as a fan because of how many absolutely excruciating looking scenarios he put his body through, whether it was perpetrated by John Moxley or, through choices Hangman made himself. He did so many crazy violent things and took so many bumps. Like I definitely am more of a Hangman Page fan now after that match between these two guys. It was extremely intense, great to watch. I was not growing up as a blood match fan or I loved hardcore matches, but they were not on this level. And I never watched too many of the death matches. Going back in the lore that Terry Funk and Mick Foley and so many others would execute, Abdullah the Butcher. I missed that stuff. I didn't get to see much Sabu. I haven't seen a ton of the old school ECW stuff except for the things that I think were appropriately violent. So this was like, wow, really, really into it. I think it was the most violent death match I've seen from AEW.
I think they've had only one other specifically in AEW, but they've definitely had Lance Archer and Moxley doing death matches on and off throughout different companies and promotions and stuff. This one was kind of one of my least favorite stories to tell, and this was, I mean, Matt Cardona, and I'm not a Matt Cardona fan. Uh, uh,
Right.
like did this last year already, and he did it for the deathmatch world championship. And the story to me for this one was guy who's not a deathmatch wrestler gets subjected to literal fucking torture from guy who is a deathmatch wrestler, and then still manages to win the match by using basically one weapon attack, like one singular weapon strike. And while they at least set up a position for it to make sense that Moxley couldn't win this match, they certainly didn't get there in an organic way. So this one really missed all the things for me except pacing and brutality, which I guess that's its own style these days.
Yeah, this match I mean, I'm sorry it lost you so thoroughly, but this is the great example that we were referencing or alluding to earlier of a match that is pretty darn strong but is ruined by its finish, minus 20 points from Gryffindor kind of
Yeah,
bag.
let me just wrap this around my own neck. Like, we'll talk about the finish
Yeah.
because I think we can still go through key points, but
Well, I mean, shit, dude. You want key points. I mean, some of my I think we had a conversation in the match in which we suggested somebody needs to wrap themselves in barbed wire and throw themselves at their opponent kind of thing. Then they're the toughest person we've ever seen. And straight up, Hangman Page does that 5 minutes later, hits a moonsault off the top rope covered in barbed wire in what is sincerely the stupidest thing you can do. But
yeah.
one
What's
one
the
me
most likely way this is going to hurt me more than you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Your barbed wire wrapped belly button bumps me in my eyelid. Like
Yeah.
that might be the one situation where I'm more fucked than you are. But yeah, it was a dumb move for Paige, but it was still like tough. It was a tough thing to do. Good on you, like for taking that and making that part of your match layout. Like that was gnarly. That was a big beat that ran in my head, but I think the biggest beat for me, and you probably knew this was coming, was the use of a fork and the way that it was.
yeah,
Holy
it, be, it became really apparent to me that I had seen a lot more death matches than you have. Like
well,
really
I've
fast.
seen matches that use the fork, but the way the fork was used for me is that they would stand behind the opponent and just kind of hold it against their forehead
Yeah,
and
just
just
like
kind of
do the I'm grinding it into you shit. Yeah.
yeah. But no, not here. Especially Moxley jammed that thing viscerally, like emphatically and repetitively into Hangman Page's forehead in a way that I've not seen in my life. And I
Right.
was just feeling that and it was done in his hairline so that the scars are easy to hide, and so everything was agreed upon by these guys, and kudos to both of them for the shit they put each other through. I hope they're damn good friends coming out of it because man, did they look like they were trying to kill each other, and that was making me squeamish. I feel like when the stabbing was over, they got this great shot of Moxley, who had been under Hangman as he was stabbing him, and there was like a spritz of Hangman's blood all over his chest and along his arm and his bicep and his armpit. And I'm just thinking, holy shit, man. I've never seen anything like this. And, I know it's because I missed the boat on earlier examples of these kinds of matches, but at the same time, it's a chance to be born again. And I think it was easily the best, blood match or hardcore type match I think I've ever seen. I'm just saying.
Well, and
Apart
this
from
is this
maybe
is
the first
why
Moxley Omega Brutality Fest, the one that didn't have the exploding ring, right? I think that was they've had two, right? Moxley and Omega. I
well,
thought they
that's the
had
thing. They
two of
always
them.
change the name. Who knows if it's a barbed wire death match or a Texas death match or an explosives death match or a
Right.
everything must go fire sale match. Like, but this is exactly why a lot of complaints that wrestling fans have don't matter. Is because this could have been an exact recreation of a death match I've seen 10 times performed by different people or the same people or whatever. But if it reaches a new audience, it's their opportunity to see it for the first time and be amazed by it.
I was amazed. I had a lot of respect for both guys. I can't imagine putting yourself or each other into that kind of pain, and blood and it and just oh my god. I mean, Hangman Page's forehead seemed like it should have been just mincemeat by the end of it, but it's the art of the industry. They both did a great job. But yes, I'm ready to talk about the finish. Did you have any other spots that really stood out to you before we do?
I was just gonna say also probably that blood that was splattering was actually just John Moxley's blood flying off of his own body, flying off his forehead onto other shit because he was waving it around. Because Paige is definitely not the bleeder that Moxley.
I think that one way or another, the moment still had a certain type of presentation to it that will not go rivaled for some time in my mind. So I'm in awe of it. I was really impressed. Again, I hope that like they made me believe that they hated each other by the end of the match until the finish, because the finish was so choreographed. Um, so Moxley, at one point, goes under the ring and gets himself a couple of bricks and a chain and brings them into the match. And for the record, the bricks were used pretty cool, right? Mashing
Yeah.
mashing Hangman's hand in between two bricks and then stomping on it. Cool. But the even cooler one, of course, while we're doing, tributes to friends and matches like Mercedes Monet did for Bailey, Moxley hits the stomp. Yeah, the Seth freaking Rollins stomp on
The curb
Hangman
stomp.
Page. Yep, the curb stomp straight onto these bricks in a really cool moment, and the crowd popped. Everybody kind of recognized what was happening there because Moxley and Seth go way back, and that was really, really neat. But it's the chain that I think I'm starting to turn the topic to, because the chain ended up being the key thing that ended this match, and Moxley basically did it to himself, huh?
No, not basically. He literally did it. Like Hangman was supposed to wrap it around his neck at one point while they were
Right,
fighting around and stuff,
right.
and it just doesn't get there for whatever reason. So, of course, Moxley, he's got all this chain. It's like a 10-foot chain. You got to put it somewhere. So, just wrap it around your neck and shoulders. That way you can hoist it easier.
We were watching the matches with a friend of ours, and he joked like, looking like the junkyard dog there, and
Yeah.
as a great throwback reference. But to me, I was thinking, yeah, well, that's gonna have a purpose, and sure enough, it had all the purpose.
I
As
knew they were
Hangman,
going to do the spot at some point because it's a brutal
sure.
looking spot. I was surprised it was the end of the match, but when they did it that deep into it, I was like, "Oh, this is a finish." That's kind of wild.
Right. But it was a believable finish. I mean, Hangman vaults Moxley over the rope, grabs the chain, pulls it tight. Moxley's face starts turning as red can get. As red as the blood that is pumping through his veins and up into his face, like it's that red. And I mean, it had to be the end. You're hating the man. Literally
I
hating the man,
mean,
Hangman.
yeah. But the big thing is Mox taps out like a bitch.
Which you have to go back like 10 years ago to see the last time Moxley tapped out.
Yeah,
And
like if he passed out, if the referee calls the match because he's incapacitated, fine, sure. Moxley doesn't tap. He's not a bitch.
but I don't know if I want to see him hang there until he's got enough time for a ref to do the 3-arm lift. Like, this is a dangerous ass spot. Like, it's a very
Oh,
dangerous
when's the
spot.
last time
He's
they did the three arm
literally.
lift? Come on. When have you seen someone actually have the arm lift and drop 3 times and the match is over? It's been like since the 80s.
It has been a while. I'm not going to say that it hasn't. I mean, he could have tried to, one arm lift and see the droop and like snap his fingers in front of his face and then call it, but it's still a moment of theatricality that I'm sure Mox didn't want to put himself through. He tapped as hard as he fucking could, as fast as he fucking could once he was in that for a good 3 or 4 seconds. Like he was in it. He turned red, he tapped.
Uh,
I'm sorry, but I would have expected nothing less. I mean, just end the match. You're not a bitch if you're dying.
I mean
Okay?
I wouldn't expect anything less from a normal human being either or many other wrestlers, but for the kind of character and for the match that this was, like first of all, it would have protected both much better, I think. But the point wasn't to protect Mox. The point was to make Hangman, and this match just didn't do a great job of that for me personally. It's my least favorite thing when Mick Foley just spends 20 minutes beating the fuck out of Randy Orton, and he lands like 5 offensive moves over the course of 20 minutes, and one of them just happens to be onto a weapon that the hardcore wrestler brought themselves out. Like it's not poetic. It's not, and especially the execution was super flawed. Even if it was a good story for you, the execution at the end is super flawed. This one's like a 4 out of 10 because they went to some brutal places, but
Uh,
not much on the storytelling, not much on the wrestling side at all.
I mean, I'm gonna have to place it higher and challenge you. I get that the finish
There
takes a
wasn't even
hit.
a cheese grater, man. Come on.
I don't want to see. I don't want to see Mox use a
I didn't
cheese
see
grater.
any flesh get flayed. I don't, I'm not
Ugh.
there.
So I'm gonna give it a 7 because it took me to places I haven't gone before. It helped do exactly what you just admitted it was supposed to do, which was make Hangman Page. Like, I'm way more of a fan of Page coming out of that match. Um,
Ooh.
I'm just being honest, and
How'd you feel
you
about the you
know,
sick fuck chant? You think that was deserved?
which one was this? Excuse me.
You sick fuck? They chanted you sick fuck.
Probably after the fork, right?
No, it took them a while actually to get there. It was kind of weird.
Or was it after Hangman Page doing the moonsault covered in barbed wire?
I
I
think it was. It might have. So it happened at a time where I think it was tongue in cheek at first, but I don't know for sure. I think it was around somewhere before or after the back rakes.
that was a little awkward. After
Yeah,
everything else they did to each other, those back rakes were strange. But I don't know, man. I'll be honest. Hangman Page, every single spot that I saw coming, and I thought, "Oh, Moxley's taking this one." Hangman Page took, and I'm floored by how much he was willing to let his body get completely torn apart. And from the back rake with the barbed wire, little puddles of blood appearing up and down his kidneys, to the steel chair covered in barbed wire wedged in the corner, to I think there was a pile driver through barbed wire, right?
on a
Like,
chain, power driver on a chain.
fun. So
Yeah,
many different things,
I
man.
will say
Like,
the biggest surprise of that match was that there were no thumbtacks.
we were, yeah, we were kind of expecting them at that point, but you're right. We missed out on the thumbtacks, but that was it.
Maybe McFoley called him up and said, "Hey, brother, that's my gimmick. Can you at least wait until I
Maybe.
die?"
Maybe, but he Moxley was doing the double arm DDT for a long time, and you have to think Mick, had to give some kind of permission. I mean, that may be the one gimmick Moxley didn't let him, or Mick didn't let Moxley take, was
Yeah,
those
maybe.
thumbtacks on that one. But good point there. I
Yeah.
give it a 7 out of 10 because while the finish was a stinker, it still did what it was supposed to do for me, and it will go down in my memory as the first true like death match I think I've seen that I mean I've seen Moxley and Omega both times really pull out the stops on each other too, but this one just hit harder for me. So I'll give it a 7 because the finish sucked, but otherwise it
All
would have
right.
been a 9.
What's the next match?
Well, that had to be the triple threat match, right? The ladies triple threat match.
I don't think that's the order, but we'll talk about it because it doesn't really matter the order.
Okay, well that's good.
Because this match is an
We
easy skip. This match was absolutely nothing. They had a stupid Russo esque double turn at the end. Nothing important happened in the ring. Literally nothing new happened. Nothing anyone hasn't ever seen before happened. At least with the Texas Death Match, you could have been a wrestling fan for how long have you been a wrestling fan, Warren?
right since 2002.
Yeah, so for 20 years and not have seen one before, there's no way you've been a wrestling fan for 20 years and not seen a generic stalemate triple threat match where the pin sponge takes the pin and then gets upset at the person who.
No, it's definitely something we've seen before. I know it felt awkward in the way it was executed. A couple thoughts just from the top of my head. Number one, Soraya. This was the first time I've seen Soraya wrestle since she got back into the ring, following her alleged retirement. And not only had she been plastic surgeryed into a different visage, but her wrestling was rust clear and looked good and felt good, but there was something super generic about her. She didn't read to me as Paige as I once knew her, right? She
She
read
even
to
did
me
all her
as
moves and still it was like kind of weird.
she read closer to kind of a catty mid card type person, like a certain version of Carmella would be, or one of the Toxic Attraction girls. It didn't feel like a true contender out of her, if I'm being honest, and that felt weird. Ruby Soho, if anything, was arguably for me. I know how over Jamie Hayter is. Don't get me wrong. Like most of the fan base was probably rooting for her, but I think our household was kind of rooting for Ruby Soho a little bit because she was preaching this character who was out on an island away from all these strange allegiances that were forming between other superstars for their various reasons, and she just wanted to be the best of the best. And that felt like the intended story going into the match. So you could almost feel like she was going to get there feasibly, but Haters as over as she is and was presented very well. And I think this was the most I've watched Jamie Hayter, period, if I'm being completely candid with you guys.
That's
I'm sorry for that
tragic,
honesty.
bro. It's
I'm sorry.
actually
I,
tragic. Sat here and talked about how important women's wrestling could be and landmarks for it. Hasn't watched a Jamie Caker match, not a single time.
it's not because I don't want to. It's because I have only
Because your
so many
girlfriend won't let
hours
you. I understand. I've been there.
I get to love wrestling, So, it was a great match from the standpoint of all three women being engaged pretty like uniformly. There wasn't a whole lot of two one-on-one going on with one person on the outside. Everybody
Right.
was kind of in the dance the whole time, and that was great. Um, but
The two highlights I could give this match, because it's never all negative, right? Never given a negative star review on here. The
right,
two things I can give to the match are I actually really liked the finish, which is probably what most people hated, but I hate that they always like. I hate that they decide to say finishes like this for matches like this where there's nothing going on. So like, oh fuck it, this is a shitty finish. But I'm a big fan of unique pinning combinations. Backslides, roll ups, things like that. Because when it comes to any amount of actual wrestling, any amateur wrestling you've ever done, you have to be on your toes because 3 seconds is not as long as it actually takes in wrestling. Like a real three
right.
second count from a ref is like this. It's done.
That's it.
It's
Yep.
so it's the kind of thing where having that experience, I really like difficult pins and stuff like that. I think they should win more often with moves like that. But uh, and then the other thing being that it was mostly a real triple threat match, not just a series of one on ones.
Right.
But
Exactly.
the whole I'm gonna scare off Storm and Soraya, but then join them anyways is dumb. The whole spray painting L's on people is dumb. It's a high school girl heel angle, so I'm not here for it.
Right, and I think that's kind of the effect from what I discussed earlier with how Soraya just looking not like the person I knew her as at her peak and now is just a catty, high school bad girl. You're right. I think that's kind of the same thing we're trying to explain here. The spot you're referencing, in case fans missed it, guys, was a series of near falls, just basically cyclically occurring while Soraya was out of commission. Still in the ring, however, Jamie and Ruby Soho start trading pinfall attempts on each other. And just as they started, I think it was you, Sam, who said, "Watch, one of them works. One of them ends the match."
Well, they
And
had done
sure
a
enough,
shitload of them throughout the whole match, so
right.
I remember saying, "I hope this actually works,"
And then it did. Yep. And
but it
Ruby,
it happened later on where it actually worked.
yeah, Ruby found herself caught off guard and got stuck in a backslide predicament and just couldn't kick out. And that was that. So, um, then yeah, Ruby Soho clears house of the caddy girls, which by the way, Tony Storm looks like trash. Holy shit. I was so blown away with all of the aesthetic choices she made that night. None of those were intelligently made and none of them look good, and I really hope she never makes some of those choices again, from the Karen platinum blonde haircut to the extremely strange choice to like basically wear a, I don't know, like a denim sumo diaper. It was disgusting. Like, oh my
It's
god.
pretty
I like
normal
women.
Tony Storm fare. She's got the '80s windswept hair, and then that's just her ring gear, my guy.
My guy, it was not a good look for me. My goodness. May that
What Tony
change.
Storm have you been watching where she's not?
Oh, the one where
Oh,
she's
you like the
on
hat. Okay.
she's in WWE, that one. The one where she's still too young to really embrace that really overtly sexual version of herself. So that just felt too weird for me. I don't know what
Welcome
to
to the
say.
internet, my dude.
It's fair. What are you gonna do? I love I love women, don't get me wrong, listeners, but that just was not a good look for me. So anyway, moving away from that, she tosses out Tony, she tosses out Soraya, and it looks like there's gonna be a moment of unity between Ruby and Jamie, and right? No way. We get the turn, and Ruby decides to align herself in a very awkwardly paced moment with Soraya and Tony, who then climb back into the ring slowly, and they do the slow hand raise where you're like, really? You're gonna hang out with these chicks? And I guess that's the case, with this whole premise being, no, you can't be on an island all by yourself, Ruby. You need to pick sides. And she's picking the side of these, you know, anti AEW original, you know, newcomers who have built their legacy elsewhere. If you could even say some of them have a legacy, Tony.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it
they
is what it
don't.
is.
It's just they're just using Paige's name to generate interest, and she happens to have two jobbers in her stable. It's a very typical women's trio.
Right. Well, I hope they do something to differentiate from being typical. There is so much talent amongst the three of them. Clearly, it's just they have way too much of a bottom feeder, lowbrow, generic ass gimmick. So let's see how they try to differentiate it.
Yeah,
But
well,
now
give the match a rating, and we'll move on to a much more important match.
I'll give it 6 out of 10, if only because they did a good job of maintaining all three women in the ring, and it had a good pace, and there was good energy throughout. There was nobody taking any lazy moments. It was good. It was solid. But it was not spectacular, and the awkwardness of the ending didn't do anything to help, and maybe even hurt a little. So 6 out of 10 for me.
Okay, this one's a 3 out of 10 for me. It had the backslide finish as a point, and actually I don't think it was a backslide, but the pinning combinations is a point for me, and you get a point for being a pro wrestler. So
Great logic. We're killing the game on our scoring card.
you can take bumps, you get a point, right? Like that's you got to show that much respect.
I feel like this match was the one we accidentally skipped as we moved on to the ladies triple threat, perhaps
Yeah, we're definitely
prematurely.
not
But
in order.
what about the Elite defending their AEW Trios championships against the awesome House of Black? That was one that I think our house was looking forward to a lot, because for some of us, they hadn't seen Omega and the Young Bucks wrestle at all before. And the House of Black are one of the really cool gimmicks in AEW, period.
Yeah, they definitely have some of the best presentation. There's still a little bit in that like Bray Wyatt family kind of place for me where it's like, okay, you guys talk about the darkness within all of us, and the house always wins, and the Black Mist is coming for you and abducting Julia Hart, and
Who
I
looked dope, by the way. Like Julia Hart's
yeah,
get up, that was sick. I liked everything about the aesthetic from all of the characters of House of Black this past week.
right. They've got the look for sure, right? But that's the thing is like the look is really good, but this wasn't even like a feud. So like there's not a whole lot of build up. So you have to just go on the match by itself, and the match by itself was pretty good, as far as a trios match goes. I mean, if you've watched AEW before, you know that there's literally no rules. Tag is just a word. Like they don't. It's not a trios tag team match. It's a trios match because tagging is just not required.
Right. And I felt like once the chaos started breaking down and everybody started hitting high impact moves, we were just in for a spot fest through the end. But there were lots of little moments that really stand out to me for this one. Stuff like Matt Jackson wanting Brody King to be tagged in just so that he can try to take advantage of that matchup just to realize, well, that was a pretty dumb idea. And even his brother being like, nope, I'm not tagging you in. Sorry. Like you
Yeah.
made your bed, you need to sleep in it. Brody Keane himself just looked amazing, quite frankly, in every scenario he had the opportunity to. If he wasn't taking tons of super kicks, he was dishing out a ton of punishment. And he's very believable as a monster. And we also got to see Kenny Omega and Buddy Murphy begin this match. Buddy Matthews, sorry everybody. Kenny Omega and Buddy Matthews start this match and basically like wrestle to a stalemate and get a good pop out of that, which is cool because Kenny Omega is Kenny Omega and is, pretty much one of the finest wrestlers you can expect to see in our generation, period. And Buddy Matthews is
Is a jobber.
he's extremely underrated, Sam. He's extremely
Uh,
underrated. He is an unmarketed top level star. He just doesn't get to show how athletically awesome he is so frequently. So getting to wrestle a Kenny Omega to stalemate is like a Chad Gable over in a certain other promotion we're not overtly naming as much as possible during this episode, getting to go a good 20 minutes with a John Cena or a Roman Reigns or a otherwise equivalent top echelon star. So that was cool for me. I call that a highlight. And then Malachi Black is Malachi Black, and he has a full understanding of how to merge his body language with his character and really maximize every moment. He is somebody who is so efficient with what he does in the ring. Like they just he's so polished, and match was great. I like this one a lot.
yeah, I thought this one was pretty good. I also had like no expectations for it, right? And this one just kind of came out of nowhere. When it comes to the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, when it comes to the Elite, I really do think that they do their best work with just generic, unannounced matches. Like whenever they seem to build up a feud, and especially for like Kenny Omega with his singles career, it always seems like there's actually too much build up
Hype.
and expectation, and then like with the explosive death match where the payoff just malfunctioned basically, or they just
Right.
decided to swerve at the end, whatever. Um, but this one was just pretty much high energy, high impact, and for once the right team won.
Yes, it was so nice knowing the House of Black is now the trios champions. I think it's the right kind of way to elevate them and give them more stage time and more screen time and let them find ways to fine tune their character. They've got everything they need. Now, if they can story tell outside the ring a little bit and help us get to know a little bit about what we are to expect from their characters, a little bit more outside of just, being dark and malevolent ass kickers, then I think this is a great way to do it. And there was the right three guys to put them over. The individual we were watching it with who doesn't get to watch as much wrestling and was truly watching their first AEW, anything ever, basically was giving shit to the notion of the elite winning because they're the VPs of the company. We had at least told them that much, and they're like, it's a
Yeah, he was
cop
like, you
out.
can't book yourself to win, and it's like, well, they are currently
And they
holding the
have,
titles.
yeah, they have, and they might do it again. But I think it was the right choice, and it was a decent surprise that they did it. And now it'll be really cool to see what it does for the House of Black. I give this an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm right there at 8 out of 10 too. I get really annoyed by the lack of tagging and the referees looking like a dipshit, but this could have easily dropped to a 6 out of 10 if it was won by a Meltzer driver. or something, like that. But I thought the finish was adequate. The biggest thing I took points off for, though, was, it's like it could have been a 10, but we take a point away for the no tag rules and the referee not having any control of anything. And we take a
Right.
point off because half the action at one point was just them throwing the Young Bucks out of the ring just so they could desperately run in and make a save over and over. And it's kind of like, okay, maybe hit them with a move, maybe do something different. Like just constantly throwing them out of the ring and expecting a different result was a bit weird.
Yeah, I do find that annoying. I don't like when you go out of the way to ensure that it's a one-on-one scenario in the ring, and then as the enforcer, you just lose your attention span and walk in a circle. That's literally what they would do. Brody and
Mm,
Matthews would toss the Young Bucks out, look at them for a couple seconds, and then decide, I'm going to take a breath and turn around and do a quick circle. But in that moment, that's when a young buck is sliding in to break up the pinfall, and it's just like, man, don't do that. Just
yeah.
watch them and
And
stop
it's
them.
right, it's the kind of thing where it's like, and what else do you expect, right? Like you're not knocking them out, you're not hitting them with a move. Like the established psychology of wrestling is you have to wear them out and eliminate them through damaging moves, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just kind of it'd
Uh,
be like in the video game if you just toss someone out of the ring, they land on their feet or the character just stands back up and they just get back in the ring.
yeah, let's get some pain going. It's true. I don't like. I hate when you go and clear the ring and then you just break your defenses immediately. Let's
Right.
let's go do a corner taunt real quick. Like stop.
Yeah,
But
it's either a lack of selling or a lack of psychology. So other than that, though, they hit all the marks. They hit all the moves, and House of Black looked pretty good. And I'm excited to see them debut or convey, a new goal because they got the titles. What else, what else is a tag team supposed to do? And a trio like the House of Black should have something interesting.
yeah, I'm excited. I think it's a good move. So we'll see how it develops. And that leaves us with 3 matches left. And we can go in the order that the real card went in, or we could deviate. I think the next match that logically I would prefer to talk about would be the tag team titles, just the good old standard 2-person ones.
Yeah, which of course was a four-person tag team match, which always has the one of the shittiest rule sets in pro wrestling.
Yeah,
Um,
so
had
shitty you can't even explain how the match works. 4-team match is what it was, like a fatal 4-way tag team match. How about that? Can we try that one?
yeah, fatal four-way tag team title bout where you gotta tag other teams in, and by the end of it, you don't know who the legal man is, anyways. And this is just a way to get more people on the card because the only thing anyone really cares about is the Ass Boys versus the Acclaimed, and we can't just keep doing that anymore. And all of our tag teams are now trios teams. The best trios team actually got relegated to the fucking pre-show, so we don't even get to talk about them. And
Really?
yeah, this match was kind of just a throwaway for me, man. The best thing about it was the Acclaim's entrance.
Sure. Yep. The Acclaimed come in hitting their beats and saying all the savage shit that they like to do. And, the guns, to their credit, man, have grown a lot really quickly. And I'm happy for them on like a good for you kind of level that they get to be in the conversation of top tag team in the division. Not necessarily the champions, though, when the Acclaimed are as hot as they are. But we're not even paying homage to the other 2 teams who hung out for this one. Jay Lethal, long standing independent ROH Impact, legend at this point. Oh, and Jeff Jarrett teamed up for this one. And I
Yeah,
feel
team
like
guys old enough to wrestle in Ric Flair's final match. And
Jeff
then on the
Jarrett.
other side, you've got two comedy mascots.
Right, Danhausen and Cassidy, which I liked their involvement in the match. I think watching Cassidy wrestle is always fun and nuanced enough, and I know you have your opinion of thinking his gimmick is shitty because there's a certain lack of commitment to it. He'll always start with his hands in his pockets, but eventually he'll stop slacking off. So, I
He
get
just
it.
goes from slacking to not slacking to slacking to not slacking. And look, I've ingested media with slacker characters like this before. Typically, they're, comedically, ironically, the most powerful at some point in that media. And there's just certain things you need to do to get that gimmick over he's never going to do. So fuck it.
Fair enough. Well, that might be why it's hit a certain type of ceiling, and now they're just kind of rotating how they can make the character fit. The him and Danhausen thing is so strange. I feel like Danhausen gets partnered with strange characters just to see what their personalities will look like together. So like Cassidy and Danhausen's one pairing, but Danhausen recently did a lot with Hook, who still has the FTW championship but not much else to do.
Anyone who's a
Um,
straight man, they just need a straight man for Danhausen's goofy. That's it.
That's totally fair. Yeah, I agree. So, but
But
cool for them to be all together. I wanted to tell you I had literally traumatic, like sweating, I had a quick trauma sweat episode as Jeff Jarrett came out to My World. That My World mashup that he did with Jay Lethal's music, because that song from Impact all those years ago when he was basically Triple Hing that promotion and just holding the title forever,
uh-huh.
and just the music where it's like meow, wow, meow, wow, meow, meow,
Yeah, I
meow,
have
like
that.
over.
I have that PTSD because I actually watch TNA related YouTube content to like find out all the stuff I didn't watch. And
Right.
yeah, you hear Jeff Jarrett's theme a whole fucking lot.
Oh my god, I didn't realize I did not want it. But that's the
Yeah.
thing, like by him coming out with that music, it shows us that even in AEW with his contract, like they're treating him like it's that canon of character, if that makes sense. It's that
Yeah.
version of Jeff Jarrett. And like that could be a problem at some point. Like he might just fuck around and win a title, like a big title, and we might just have to
Oh
cope with it at some point.
Jesus. There's
I don't want him to, but that music means like they're gonna take him serious. I don't want them
Do you think
to.
they're gonna take him seriously because he's using the music he paid for 20 years ago and he doesn't want to pay for new music?
By the transitive property of wrestling, yeah, because
No, that's like saying
he's
because Triple H comes out to the game, he's gonna start a stable and fucking win every belt.
if Triple H could dominate the content, he will. Like
No,
honestly, so
well, I don't want to talk about this match anymore. We're already at 2 hours total for this thing.
all
We've got
right,
2 more
all
matches
right.
to talk about, but luckily,
The
this
Guns
match
win.
doesn't even deserve a rating, and neither does the next one on the card, in
But
my
but but but
opinion.
but 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 FTR returned. Can we at least get a yes on that? We get to see some more FTR, and they look jacked, and they look poised to beat
Oh, and they
our.
buried the tag team title champions after they won a fatal
Yeah,
4-way tag team title match, so
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it
yep,
was just
yep,
an
yep.
excuse to bring FTR back. Like, I don't know. I like FTR and I'm excited, but like I was kind of hoping they were going to go do something else. I don't really care to see them win their titles back from the Guns, and I really don't care to see them as solidify the Guns as AEW tag champs. So
Yeah, I hope they don't give up a win to the Guns. That would be heartbreaking. So
like they
they've
kind of
never
gave up
been.
the Guns and they gave up the win to the Guns in a kind of contrived way because everyone knew that they were going to take a break from wrestling because they had been flying 48 hours a day to fucking wrestle for 3 promotions. And so that one was kind of sour. It was literally like, hey, hold our belts for us while we take a vacation. And I can see my kid who's been fighting off cancer or whatever. Like, and now they're just going to come back and pick up their belts. And if they don't pick up their belts, it'll be even worse. So,
Have they ever been AEW tag champs? Because I think that's the story, is that they haven't.
FTR?
Yeah.
I could have sworn I'm fucking tripping balls if they had 6 different tag team titles and they never had
And
the
none of them were the
AEW belt.
AEW titles, right? I would
Or
love to
maybe it
double
was just
check
because
that.
the Guns, like, no, because I could have sworn I heard the Guns cut a promo where they talked about taking the titles off them before they went off TV.
They took the titles off the acclaimed, my guy.
Hmm. I don't know. Maybe I got my wires crossed, but that's even weirder then. That's even weirder.
Well, there you go. We'll have to look it up and double check, but I'm pretty sure the point is they've never won those titles, and it's only a matter of time before that gets rectified, and hopefully at the expense of these silly little, yeah, uh,
I guess
gun
you're right. I
guys.
guess they never were AEW. Oh, they were a long time ago. They were years.
Okay, they got it September 5th, 2020 to November 7th. They had it for like 2 months, so
Yeah.
they'll get them back. Anyway, you're welcome to move on, and we shall, to Wardlow and Samoa Joe for the TNT Championship.
Man, what was
It's
their third belts thing? Because they were Ring of Honor Tag Team Champs, and I thought they were NJPW Tag Team Champs. What was their? Oh, AAA.
There it is, AAA. I was just about
I
to
didn't even
say
know
it, so I
AAA
say it
had
cool
tag
and
team
smart.
titles. I thought it was all trios.
Wah, wah.
Too
Well,
many
we
belts.
learned
Too
something.
many belts on AEW. That's the
That's
problem with too
true.
many belts.
Yeah, too many belts.
Speaking of too many belts, here's a useless belt they don't need.
You're talking about the TNT title?
Yeah, the TNT title and the Ring of Honor TV champion,
Oh, yeah.
Samoa Joe, faced Wardlow for only one of those two titles. And
Of
I mean,
course.
come on, Joe, you can't be hogging all the titles this late in your career.
No, and it was also a good opportunity to give him something to do, probably as he maintains the ROH championship following his loss here to Wardlow for the TNT title. Um, and Wardlow needed something to get him back on the up and up, and this helps a lot, though it wasn't booked the way that we expected it to be. First of all, Wardlow looked a lot like Jeff Hardy,
Yeah,
which
I was
was
about to
entertaining.
say if Jeff Hardy doesn't retire soon, or I mean, Jeff Hardy can retire soon because he's got someone to take over his moveset apparently.
Really? Yeah, we saw
Whisper in the
the
Wardlow.
right? Who would have expected that? The Wardlow in the Wind, I think sounds even better.
Yeah, the
Um,
Wardlow and the wind. Well, the whisper in the Wardlow leaves the twist until the end. You know, it sounds like you're
yeah,
saying something normal, then you get the twist. You
right.
know, the
And then
Swanton Wardlow bomb,
the Wardlow bomb is probably good
the
enough, or the
Wardlawn bomb.
Swan Ward bomb.
I don't know. It
We'll
didn't look
stop.
great when he did it though, which is really sad.
It's funny how both moves made him look like physically smaller in a weird way. Like as he was doing these agile things, his body looked more appropriate to do them. And it like I don't
Yeah,
know how to explain that. It was just an
like
optical illusion.
if he's doing like a double axe handle or he's doing like a body splash, you know, like just a flying dive, he probably looks, you know, like a big dude and there's that weight behind it. But when he's
Right.
flipping through the air, right, he looks doesn't look as heavy. The impact doesn't look as crunchy. Maybe I don't know. I haven't seen him do these moves too often. I'm sure he's done them before. I don't think he debuted them tonight.
It's
Um,
weird, yeah, to think I hadn't seen either, but especially I'm pretty sure he debuted the Whisper and the Wardlow for sure.
you think so?
Um,
I'll have to. I might do some research on that because, yeah, I know I've seen Wardlow do some high flying stuff. You know, and you got to get that in your career early because you won't get to do that for very long. You don't. You know, the
if you're
Undertaker
that
used to
big, yeah.
do. Undertaker used to do an elbow drop. He used to do a top rope. He used to walk the top rope and do an elbow drop like almost springboard style. And he stopped
Wow.
doing that like 2 years into his career because he realized it was just fucking up his body, right? So
Yeah, no
did not
longevity
take
with that.
long for a large body like that. You know, same thing with Big Show. Like you're young and you're like, I want to hype the crowd. I want to pop the crowd. Let's go do this awesome move that big guys don't do. And then big guys
Right?
find out why they don't do them pretty quick.
I was just about to take it out of your mouth that I used to watch the Big Show, or really the Giant at the time, hit
Missile
that missile
drop
drop
kick.
kick. Right.
Yes.
Blows my mind still, every single time. So yeah, Wardlow hit a couple of those moves, but it does trigger me to remember that Joe looked just generally sluggish in this one. I don't remember him looking too much like himself at all.
This was a big pacing drop. They started with some high pace matches early on. Like Jericho and Ricky Starks was pretty high pace for a Jericho match in today's era, you know, for what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of continued to ramp up, you know, with the high violence. Maybe a little dip with the women's match, but they still kept it, like we said, like like a real triple threat, not a bunch of solo matches. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, this one seemed like the biggest dip, and it was right before the tag team match, which, you know, the fatal four way tag team match, which didn't really help, because that one did try to bring the pace back up a bit.
Right.
But there was just nothing that stood out from this match. It was
Well, I
Honestly,
mean,
very
apart from
skippable.
Wardlow's offense.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe Samoa Joe and Wardlow just don't work together too well. They weren't in sync. They didn't seem like they were really like wrestling each other. They seemed like they were wrestling independently, but in the same ring. Weird.
Yeah, not a lot of chemistry, maybe.
Not a lot of big moves either. Maybe Wardlow just can't throw Samoa Joe around like we're used to. But I was really hoping we'd get a powerbomb symphony because I figured your friend Jeff would love that.
Sure, but what ended up happening instead is another rare tap out. This one from Joe, and Joe tapped out to his own move, the Coquina Clutch, which
Yeah.
Wardlow like just snapped on him, and that was it. So pretty surprising to see that happen. Wardlow wins the title, which is more appropriate. Less surprising is what I'm saying, but still, this was pretty much a what 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, pretty average. But
Yeah.
I'll remember Wardlow's offense.
Yeah, a 5 out of 10 for you is like a 2 out of 10 for me, so that sounds about
Right.
right.
Ah, pain.
It's
All
not
right.
good. Stop doing bad matches. Like, do this bad match on TV, and I'll probably give it a 5 out of 10.
So we've got one more to bring us home, and then what a home it is. It's an hour-long Iron Man match, which turned out to blossom into another 20 minutes of content when MJF and Bryan Danielson have the big blow-off to their feud in one of the biggest title matches in AEW's history, if length certainly has anything to say about it. And I'm sure you're gonna agree with me, like this was an excellent segment of wrestling. Like, how can you expect much more out of this? You're going to tell us how, I'm sure.
Well, there was a lot to take in, and when it comes to an Iron Man match, I mean, we spend more time than the actual match talking about them most of the time, and that's probably not going to be the case. I'd like to keep this one short and sweet only because you can get lost in all the miniature details, but um, I watched a lot of the parts of this match twice, you know, and it's hard to focus in on one or two things, but I liked the story that they were telling. I liked a lot of the ideas. I liked the way the pinfalls worked. The Daniel Bryan getting that first pinfall and then
Yeah.
MJF cheating to basically tie it up was
Yeah.
really good.
And then MJF getting another pin off that tie, like to take the lead, was clever. Very smart.
Yeah, so um there's about 20 minutes left when MJF took the lead cuz it took I want to say it took like 25 minutes to get the first pinfall for Daniel Bryan.
Yep. About 34 minutes left on the clock.
Yeah, and then a minute later, MJF hits a low blow and pins Bryan. But then because the match is continuous, there's no bullshit rest period or now they made sure to point out that there's no baby 30 seconds. Everyone gets to stand up. Period, which makes this entire gimmick work. It makes this entire not gimmick, but this spot work where he just
Sure.
pins him again.
Yep.
He gave up the pinfall for the DQ. So Daniel has 2 points, but then he pins him twice, so we're tied up. And
Yep.
that's great heel storytelling. We've seen this with Randy Orton in the past where he beat the shit out of John Cena with a chair. And I think he got one pinfall out of it, and then like, okay, well it's tied, but look at all the damage he did. This one was
That's
even better because he got more than a single pinfall out of it, so it's like technically always worth it to do it this way, which is a good cheat. He just was already down by one.
That's what I was trying to explain. Thank you for saying the record straight. My bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, very clever, very shrewd, excellent heel move. That's what heels are supposed to do is try to get a one up based off of, dirty tactics. And we hadn't seen that before, at least not in my time. Of
The I was just gonna say the thing that was surprising to me is I thought Daniel Bryan's first fall was gonna come from putting MJF in a label lock early on, and MJF taps out early to not be in any pain. Because that's one
Right.
of my favorite wrinkles, and I think they did this in the Ultimate Submission match between Benoit and Kurt Angle,
Mm-hmm.
where Kurt was put like in a one of them was put in a submission early on, and they tap immediately. And the idea is, I'm not going to let this guy wrench my fucking body. I've got a whole hour to go.
Right.
So I was a little surprised they didn't go with that, but it probably makes for better wrestling that they didn't.
And this was great wrestling. Everything that I remember, it reminds me that MJF, yes, maybe physically as the character is a couple steps behind Brian, but
Well,
he you couldn't tell it by the way he performed
I
at
mean,
the
he was
first.
literally taking water breaks. They were trying very hard to tell you in the story that he is behind him, that he is not as good as him.
Right. Which is cool. I mean, that protects Brian from everything else that happens as the night goes on. But MJF as a
Uh,
performer was in it 100% every step of the way, doing great character work and deepening his arsenal and belonging with one of the greatest wrestlers of our generation, if not the greatest wrestler of our generation.
Yeah, I think. So, what do you think the story of this match was?
Oh boy. Well, the story of the match to me was MJF wanting to lull Daniel Bryan into a sense of security by limiting his underhanded tactics after that first segment anyway. That first when he tied everybody up, with about 20 minutes left. I think it was him trying to keep up with them with Daniel Bryan as much as he could, Bryan Danielson, excuse me. And then just trying to survive. And he succeeded in that until the draw, and then was screwed over by the notion that he'd have to continue wrestling on a sudden death basis. And that's when he was like, okay, well, if you're going to pull one over on me, I'm going to find the easiest way out of this I can. He eventually does, clocking Bryan Danielson with the oxygen tank he had used between the end of the match and the restart to determine the winner. He clocks him with the oxygen tank, hits a finish, and that's the end of the match. Well, actually, it's the LaBelle lock, right? Another interesting example of a wrestler tapping out to their own move who doesn't usually tap out to anything. Weird choice there, but I think yeah, that's the overall like he wanted to survive, he needed to survive, he survived, and then he cheated the most classic way he knows how because he felt cheated himself that he had to continue going beyond the hour. Let the draw be the draw. Live to fight another day would probably be what MJF would have preferred.
The story of this match to me was the idea of what makes a good wrestling match. Because throughout it, with an Iron Man match, you get to tell really, really long stories and you get to tell a bunch of different wrinkles. And usually, it's almost like there's usually two or three different matches within it. It's like the first half hour match, then the next 20 minutes, and then the last 10, it usually really ramps up with stuff happening. And for me, the idea of this match was that you don't have to be the best wrestler, or maybe not what it takes to make a great wrestling match, but what it takes to be a champion. Because in pro wrestling, it's never the guy who's booked to be the best at wrestling who's always champion. You know, heel champions always prove that there's other ways to get the job done. And to
Right.
me, the idea was Daniel Bryan was showing off that he actually is the best wrestler today in the world, has been for a long time. And when it comes to at least, at the very least, like in ring performance, he is the best wrestler. And I think MJF went out there and proved that he is the best professional wrestler in the world today, and that he is the best character in wrestling today. And similar in vein to the Hangman Adam Page getting like the credibility from getting his ass beat and just literally tortured by John Moxley, you know, this was supposed to be the idea of like Daniel Bryan being able to give the rub to MJF for being able to go this long and do this match and stuff. But you know, to me, and this is not most of these stories, at least the ones I think that I'm seeing are not particularly like new, not super novel, but to me this was definitely a match where it's about styles clashing is what makes a great match. Matchups in real fighting in MMA, UFC, and in pro wrestling are about different styles. And I think these guys do bring two very different but very good styles. I think they work excellently together. And you can tell that they really put some thought into what would make this really good. So to me, the idea of this match is that you don't have to be the best wrestler to be the best wrestler.
It's very deep. I love how your meanings always seem to have extra gravity compared to the ones I have. I need to start being prepared for this question more so I don't just ramble my way through an answer and instead I come out with something poignant like you just did. Bravo. One thing I do want to say is that I'm an MJF believer. Not that I'm not a Bryan Danielson believer. It's just at this stage in the run, I feel like MJF is the better character. He really is.
Right.
And it was a great display of how unrivaled he is right now at being being the top guy. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think his run deserves to be long and filled with many narrow escapes. I think he's capable of grating all sorts of negativity out of the fan base towards him, but the respect is also there. I think we're watching something special unfold in his career, and I can't wait to see if one day he'll be lured over to some of the other promotions we're determinedly not talking about today, just so that he can have even bigger stages because he's knocking it out of the park right now with AEW in every facet he can. And this was an extremely important trademark win for him and one that does stand being rewatched several times over. So kudos to both men but especially to MJF for just being able to come out of that segment truly the better wrestler. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I was a big fan of this one. Let's talk some key moments that I thought were really good. Before we hit it with the score and get out of here because we're officially over time, but it ain't no thing right now.
We're
At least,
crushing it. Why
yeah.
not,
I
man?
mean, it
It's
was a
our
long episode, right? We got the big main events and stuff. So,
yeah.
um, the the first pinfalls I thought were pretty good. Like the first half hour, basically gives us our first bit of storytelling of Daniel Bryan would have won this match. It was a singles match. But
Yep.
then MJF's cleverness, sort of ties it up with his cheating and everything.
Yep.
Um, I thought that when the referee told MJF go ahead, hit him with the belt because a DQ doesn't, in an Iron Man match, I guess even in sudden death, because I think it happened in sudden death, he was explaining to him that, Bryan will be awarded the fall and he'll win. So an Iron Man match is one of the few times where disqualifications can technically cost you your title belt.
Yep.
And I've thought about that in the past and like how that's worked with the Judgment Day Rock versus Triple H one, whereas normally it would cause basically no title change, blah, blah, blah. So like I thought it was great that they worked that in. And there are times in this match I'd have to like go through and like note them all and break them down, but there's multiple times in this match where they pay homage to like some of the best Iron Man matches, Brett and Shawn and all that stuff. And so I think that's definitely, if it's not an intentional nod to the Judgment Day Iron Man match, it is in my head. So I'm a fan of that.
Yep.
Another one was that fucking tombstone from the middle turnbuckle.
Oh,
They
so
had
gnarly.
they did a great job with false finishes and near falls in
Mm-hmm.
this one. I think that's another
Mm-hmm.
big. When it comes to an Iron Man match, it's tough to get people invested the whole way. I don't think Iron Man matches are very good on the whole, especially since they always milk the first 10 minutes of the match. Like there's nothing happening because they know they got to get through the full hour. And so, like, they locked up once in the first 4 to 6 minutes, right? Like, it's just how it goes. So, I think as a product, Iron Man matches are tough to pull off. and they're usually not great as a full product. You're usually really invested in like the last 10 minutes, but they spent the full last 10 to 15 minutes just absolutely killing each other with over the top moves that just weren't finishers, and then started going through like every finisher they've ever done. So I thought that the near falls, especially in Sun Death, were surprisingly well done.
Yeah, there were a lot of moves that coulda, shoulda, woulda put him away. Like Brian hit the running knee again late in the match that put him down for the first
Oh, and
pinfall.
the cell where he flops his legs over and he goes straight into the pin, you just think it's over.
Right. Wild. Great moments, great crowd manipulation, great character work. I just see facial expressions when I think of my favorite moments of this match. MJF was all over being in character. And again, maybe his character is just being really good at being a douchebag, which is so easy for some people to tap into, but he's just so good at it. And the athleticism, the stamina, the fact that they did work so hard to help MJF look incapable of keeping up with Brian Danielson athletically, only for him still to pull it off in the end in just such a trademark win. There's plenty of highlights here, and again, I'm just really in awe of both men's athleticism. I think it was one of the finer main events that AEW has produced in their time, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm excited for what it will mean to the perception of MJF's character and his championship run, and it's just great stuff overall.
Yeah, there's so many little moments throughout the hour too, like Daniel Bryan saying, "I have till 5" when he's pulling on his hair or something like early on. He's got the rope break and the ref's counting. Um, just little stuff like that where you don't have to be like completely face or completely heel is a big part of why AEW is really good. And I think this is a great example of like when AEW puts their best foot forward. My only beef is twofold, I guess. Again, instead of doing like they almost did the pass out spot where they raised the arm 3 times, and I thought for sure that was it. That was a false finish that I thought for sure was actually going to be the end of it. And Daniel Bryan tapping out, that means both Blackpool Combat Club members tapped out tonight, which makes them both bitches, and I'm not okay with that. But they also shouldn't have done it where they both pass out due to pain, because that would have also been hokey. So not super big on those. The oxygen tank spot at the end was pretty good, especially since we had already gone through multiple spots where the ref had DQ'd him earlier, gave away the DQ fall, took away the ring when he noticed it, and then told him to go ahead and just fucking cheat. I would like to DQ you, because it's sudden death and it would end the match. So like they did a great job of not making the ref look like a bitch, which is really rare for AEW.
Yeah, there's a many reasons why this is one of the most important types of championship segments they could have produced at this stage. It was all top level stuff. For
I
me,
just I really
go
need
ahead.
them to stop putting Daniel Bryan in hour-long matches where he's clearly much better than his opponent and he doesn't get to win.
Ooh, well, I wonder what he'll be up to next. There's got to be a couple other, up and coming type of personalities. Maybe he'll go on to face or to put over Ricky Starks next.
Oh my god.
That
No, if Daniel Bryan doesn't have even just a short world championship run, I'll be really sad because I think he deserves it as far as AEW work goes. I think he's the best in-ring performer and the best wrestler today, pretty much. MJF might have the better character. He's the hot new thing, but like this was a perfect match that could have protected MJF. And I think we talked about it where I have a million different finishes you could do, right? It's just not what they chose to do. They didn't choose to have MJF drop the belt and be protected. So, but this would have been the perfect match for Daniel Bryan to get the belt off of him for like 2 weeks and then lose it again. And then MJF can win the rubber match. And if they don't have a program, because here's my problem. If they don't have a full-on program, then I don't know how much it matters for Daniel Bryan to put him over in this capacity. Because we're just so used to the rubber booking, 50-50 booking, full on kind of a thing. And so, that's where I'm at. I felt like this was the time to have a short Daniel Bryan's officially the world champ run. And I think we missed the window. I don't think it'll ever happen now.
It's definitely arguable that it will, and I would be excited to see how they get us there. I'm certain there are plenty of different devices they could employ, whether it's a tournament or a fatal four-way or a battle royal or something we haven't seen before. But I have faith it will happen because Brian Danielson's reputation and his legacy are not tarnished by this match. If anything, many people are just respecting him more for how capably he elevated MJF's title run with this victory that he handed him. And I don't think there's a reason to believe that that won't happen, a Brian Danielson title reign, that is, because I'm sure the superstar wants it one more time himself. And I know there are others out there who would want it for him. So don't lose faith, Brian Danielson fans. Just know that he just got caught up in one of the more important title reigns in AEW's history right now. MJF really needs this one to have a lot of clout to it. So a very important building block was achieved this past Sunday. We'll all have to buckle up and see which one comes next, because it should be a lengthy one for MJF here, in my opinion. I'm ready to bring
All
it
right,
home,
score it.
buddy.
Score the match. Score the match. Can't bring it home. You gotta score the match.
9 out of 10. 9 out of 10.
Okay. I'm giving it an 8.5. I think it's everything else is an 8. That was good. Everything that was bad is like a 2 or 3. I think I gave out like a 2, 3, 4, and then the rest were 8s. So overall, a very solid show. No real stinkers, no real total duds. I mean, there were some wastes of time, but when it comes to time, I value my time pretty heavily. So that's why I give harsh ratings to things, because I feel like I wasted my time.
And I give my time to everybody.
Well, and that's why you're so tired all the time. And
8s, 9s, and 10s for everyone. Yay!
If you gave out more 4s, you'd get to watch more wrestling.
That's really actually a very poignant thing to say. I'll give that thought as we lead into next week's episode of Scheduled for One Fall. The march towards WrestleMania continues. AEW flips over to some new storylines. Will we ever get to watch some Impact? All the answers to questions like these and more coming at you from Roz Warren and the ace that runs the place, Sam Tate, next week. Thanks very much for having us this week, especially from my new abode. We'll see if we can continue to keep the momentum. Sam, bring it home.
What do you think? Should we do it live next week, or should we go back to recording?
Hey, I saw our number of watchers go from 1 to 2 at least 5 times during this. So I'd say we're getting some movement. We'll just have to play it by ear, my friend. I'm definitely down to do it however you wish to. I'd love to figure out how we could turn on our cameras and have some fun seeing all of our fans' faces and try to carry us forward towards that momentum. So still, plenty to come from us here at Scheduled for One Fall. Anything can come at any time, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well, we'll see you guys next week. Catch out the podcast on Wednesday. It may be live, it may be recorded. But that's going to do it for us. Let us know down in the comments below. Should we be watching Impact? What are the things we missed? What is something you want to hear us talk about, or something that you think deserves to be seen? Because we're always open to recommendations for more wrestling. But we're going to call it here with the 1, 2, 3. We'll see you all next week. Peace out, everyone.